Chapter 8 of Her Love from Above. A Frog in a Pot. Johnny sat on a wooden bench outside Haven's Rest as he considered the speaker's words. The First Lady was once a resident at the lodge, and her story touched him in a personal way. He was not a crier, yet he'd had trouble keeping back the tears as she spoke about her abuse. This lady, Kate, had a slight limp when she walked, a limp caused by an injury she incurred while being repeatedly thrown across the room during one of her husband's rages. After 3 intensive surgeries to repair the damage, she learned that her hip would never be the same, which was evidenced by the limp or cane that sometimes accompanied her walk. Initially, when asked if her husband beat her, she explained that her answer had always been no. She didn't consider being thrown across the room dozens of times into random furniture or walls on the same scale as being hit with a fist. It wasn't until her psychologist explained that being thrown was just as bad as being punched because they both cause severe physical injuries that she realized the truth of her situation. She also learned from experience that the abuse one suffers from an abuser always gets worse with time, not better. No matter how often her husband apologized or begged for forgiveness, he always repeated the offense. Johnny looked toward the lowering sun as he considered his judgmental reaction to Kate when she first began speaking. She was an intelligent woman, so he couldn't understand why she had chosen to marry and stay with a physically abusive man. That's when she made a statement that shocked him enough to alter his entire mindset, a statement that hit him like a ton of bricks. First, she explained that the physical abuse didn't begin until 6 months into their marriage. Before that, even though he was sometimes brash with other people, he was always kind to her. Then, after the 6-month mark, when she became pregnant, it was like a switch flipped and he became a different person. That's when the physical abuse began. Kate explained that it was slow at first, like forcefully gripping her hands because he didn't like what she was doing, blocking her in a room for an undetermined amount of time as he screamed or preached at her, or punching a wall or door in front of her face, usually missing her in the process. But the statement that altered Johnny's mindset was that, regardless of how bad the physical abuse became, it wasn't the worst type she endured. To her, the verbal, mental, emotional, and sexual abuse was far worse. Johnny shook his head in awe, wondering how she considered the horrendous physical beatings she endured the lesser of the evils. Kate continued by picturing herself as a frog dropped into a pan of cool water over a low heat. She would have jumped out if she'd been dropped into boiling water, but because her husband's torture started slowly and was sprinkled with an abundance of apologies, sweet notes, flowers, loving text messages, and gifts, she didn't realize what was truly happening. He gave her just enough hope amidst the horror that she continued to pray for him to change. Kate's roller coaster life of being degraded and then praised, hated and then loved, screamed at and then cherished, kept her in a constant state of confusion. One minute, she was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he couldn't live without her. And the next, she was the most horrible creature on the planet, and no one would ever be able to put up with her. Had Kate not secretly sought help from a counselor to see how she could fix herself, because her husband claimed she had bipolar disorder and mental health issues, she would never have known what was truly happening. Like the frog, she would have gradually boiled to death, which she eventually decided was her husband's intent. She ended her talk by explaining how, during the last few months of her marriage, The hood of her car popped open multiple times while she was driving on the interstate. Against her husband's demands, she took her vehicle to the dealership's mechanic to see what was wrong with the latch. When he informed her that it was okay, one of her secret friends, secret because she wasn't allowed to have friends, suggested it could be her husband trying to cause her death so he could collect on her $2 million life insurance policy. She didn't give her friend's suggestion any credibility until after she fled from her husband, and that was only because the day she left was the last time the hood popped open. The dealership was correct. There was nothing wrong with the latch. Kate surmised that her husband suspected she was on her way out the door and had decided to try profiting from her death before she could leave. Since his abuse had not caused her to kill herself out of despair, which she suspected was his desire, a tragic automobile accident would enable him to collect the life insurance money and move on to his next victim. He could be rich while playing the "woe is me" card to gain sympathy from others. He had no way of knowing she had changed the beneficiary of her life insurance policy to her parents several years earlier. She knew money was all that mattered to him, so he would have shipped their daughters off to his family as soon as she was gone. She hoped her parents could convince him to allow them to take the children, and that insurance policy would give them the means to bribe him into giving them custody. Johnny compared the situation of Kate's with his. He didn't endure the same physical abuse she had, but he understood the verbal, emotional, mental, and sexual torment. When Kate explained that sexual abuse could include the refusal of a marriage partner to be intimate, he was all ears. Without question, he knew what that was like. Madison refused to bed him unless she needed extra money for something super expensive. Then she would be all over him. So, in her own discreet manner, she traded intimacy for his agreement to take on extra jobs and earn the necessary money. He hated himself for it, but he and Madison shared a bed so seldom that he would do almost anything for affection. Even then, once or twice a year was all he could expect. As far as the mental abuse, Madison was constantly degrading him or making statements like, "Nobody will ever love you like I love you," or "No one would ever put up with your bull." After being told you're scum long enough, you begin to believe it, even if that belief is subconscious. He thought of his response to Ava's slumped shoulders when she first entered the lodge. He had been furious at the person who squelched such a lovely lady spirit. Yet, when he thought about his own shoulders, they were often hunched due to a feeling of inferiority. That physical mannerism was recent. He wasn't sure when it first surfaced, but knew it was after his marriage to Madison. He found that thought-provoking. When the second guest speaker spoke about narcissism, it jarred him to the core. She began by explaining that not all narcissists are physically abusive, but all physically abusive people stand a high chance of being narcissists. She clarified her statement by including, "If you lived in a relationship where your spouse beat or physically abused you, and this includes punching or kicking holes in the walls or doors when they get mad, or throwing knives or hammers or whatever in your direction, then make no mistake, you were living with a narcissist. One day," she explained, "that wall would have been your face. That knife or hammer would have hit its mark. And no matter how often that person apologized and begged for forgiveness, their abuse would only have worsened. It's a sickness, an evil that rarely changes." Johnny froze in awe at her words. He couldn't count the number of times he had repaired a wall because Madison got angry and kicked a hole in it, or threw a kitchen knife into the sheetrock next to where he stood. Then, as he listened to this speaker, nearly everything she described about abusive relationships applied to his marriage. When she finished her presentation with the list of narcissists' favorite sayings, it was spot on. He had heard those sayings so often that his nightmares centered around them. As he breathed in the fresh mountain air, he closed his eyes and mentally replayed some of those statements. No one will ever love you like I love you. No one will ever treat you the way I treat you. You're so lucky to be with me. I'll kill you if you ever try to leave me. I would rather see you dead than with another person. Money is your God. All you care about is money. You think you're so much better than me. I just can't do anything right. I just can't make you happy. Nothing I do is good enough for you. I do everything for you. What have you ever done for me? If you leave me, I'll kill myself. Wow, he uttered out loud. No wonder I'm always so miserable. I'm living with a full-fledged narcissist. Buck and Jenny are right. Haven's Rest was built for people like me. Johnny, he heard a voice call out. He stood and turned to see Buck and Ava heading in his direction. Would you mind walking Ava to her cabin? Buck asked. It'll be a day or two before her other stuff arrives, but she's requested to see the cabin tonight. I've got the directions here. He handed Johnny a small map. I've got something else I need to tend to, and she doesn't know her way yet, so I'd rather her not be alone. Sure, Johnny replied. I need to walk off some frustration anyway. Oh? Buck asked quizzically. You were right, Johnny said, straightening his shoulders so he didn't hunch. As hard as it is to admit, Haven's Rest was built for people like me. Buck's eyes glistened with pride of an accomplishment. There are several empty rooms in the lodge, so until we can get another cabin ready, you're welcome to stay in one of them. Also, he added, I don't think you should wait until Madison is gone. I think you'd be wise to move into one of those rooms tonight. Johnny nodded and blew out air. I'll choose one when I get back. When he turned toward Ava, he instantly noticed her shivering. Do you not have a jacket? He asked. She shook her head as a faint smile revealed an embarrassment he hadn't expected. I barely escaped with my life. Jackets and clothes weren't so important at the time. Here. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering her long blonde braid as he did. Oh, she urged, I can't take your... Sure you can, he interrupted. I'm wearing one of Charlie's flannel shirts with a t-shirt under it. I'll be plenty warm. Now, he glanced down at the map. Your cabin is... Oh, we passed your cabin today on the way to the lake. I know exactly where it is. He bowed and gestured his hand in an old-fashioned manner that indicated the correct direction. Right this way, my lady, he instructed. She smiled at his silliness. Thank you, sir. She bent her knees and curtsied, as was typical for ladies of old. Angry eyes glared at them from across the lodge lawn. Madison was right. She knew her husband was interested in Jenny the moment he looked at her. In the shadow of the evening, with Ava's hair hidden beneath his jacket, Madison mistook Ava for Jenny. With Buck handing Jenny off to Johnny, she knew the sweet love story portrayed by Mona was a lie. Buck wasn't interested in Jenny, not unless he was her pimp. You will see what happens to you, she promised through clenched teeth. You will see. She hurried toward her vehicle where her mother stood waiting. They enjoyed dealing with those who needed to be put in their places, even if they lived at Haven's Rest. No one was going to steal their inheritance or tell them what they could or could not do. A stern determination settled over her being. They had to work together to do this. They needed to find an attorney and private investigator in the nearby town to prove Auntie's current will was a fraud. Next, Madison would secretly locate Jenny Bazin's ex-husband, which presumably would be as simple as a Google search. She knew Jenny's story had to be one of abuse and possible disappearance, and she secretly hoped he was an axe murderer. She smiled. Wouldn't that be priceless? Regardless, whether or not he was a murderer, he had a right to know that Jenny was currently sleeping with her husband. "They're doing it," Arden sadly stated. "I was hoping they would change their minds about the money once they saw the ministry and how many people it was helping." "Nope," Teasel said. "Money is their god. And it appears that both revenge and money are Madison's," Arden added after a deep breath. "I guess we need to report this and see about getting some assistance. Jenny's ex-husband is now a well-respected law officer. He's risen in the ranks since she left. And he's never stopped searching for her," Teasel added. "People like him don't like losing. They never give up." Teasel and Arden's attentions were immediately drawn to a brilliant light etching down from the heavens. "Guess there's no reason to request assistance," Teasel surmised. "The Father thinks we need it too." Moments later, a towering angelic warrior was hovering in their midst. His skin and wings were the color of desert sun, and his eyes were a brilliant bluish green with specks of yellowish brown circling their pupils. He wore a white angelic garment that flowed to his feet with a deep crimson sash tied around his waist. It was nearly the length of the robe, although it was made from a much silkier material. He appeared bereft of weapons, though they both knew that meant nothing, as the most dangerous weapons were often hidden in the ether until their use was required. As they watched, his wings slowly withdrew into his body, and his feet came to a rest on the soil before them. "Nahath," Arden welcomed. "It's nice to see you. We thought we might need some assistance." "Yes," Nahath agreed. "The Father has reassigned me here." His voice lay in the lower bass register and fit perfectly with his enormous frame. Being one of the giants of the angelic realm, both Teasel and Arden were pleased with his arrival. Nahath's eyes took in the familiar surroundings before he said, "I was called elsewhere upon Bobby Joe's passing, but I'm back now. If you two will keep a watch on the guest who came for the reading of that will, I'll keep a watch on the residents." Teasel and Arden submitted to his authority without question, because Haven's Rest had been Nahath's assignment for decades. He would know best how to protect its residents.